The Pentagon sat on this for 9 days. What was released this morning is only part of the picture. What follows is the full account. 0317 hours, February 3rd. The Arabian Sea, 190 nautical miles southwest of the Yemeni coastline. The water is black and moonless. The USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group is cutting northwest at 18 knots. Its flight deck a city block of organized darkness, its hull casting no visible wake in the pre-dawn stillness. Then the AN/SPY-6V1 air and missile defense radar, the most advanced shipborne radar ever fielded, erupted with contact data. 43 tracks, simultaneously, all bearing northeast, all terrain hugging at under 15 feet of altitude, all inbound at Mach 0.95. The electronic warfare officers aboard the USS Frank E. Peterson Jr., the Arleigh Burke-class Flight 3 destroyer screening the carrier's forward arc, didn't reach for their coffee. The watch floor went stone silent. Because what the SPY-6 was painting on its displays wasn't computing cleanly. The radar cross-section returns on these contacts were hovering around 0.1 square meters, a number that sits in a maddening gray zone. Too substantial for commercial quadcopters. Too small and acoustically unstable for conventional cruise missiles. The return signatures were fluctuating, not holding the steady profile that allows the Aegis combat system's track via missile processing to snap a clean classification onto a target within its standard 2-second window. It took Aegis 12 seconds to issue preliminary classifications. In the language of modern naval air defense, 12 seconds is a geological epoch. 12 seconds is the difference between a layered, sequenced interception and a foot race you might lose. The strike group commander had 38 seconds to commit. The arithmetic of that decision was brutal. Option 1, authorize SM-6 launches from the Mk-41 vertical launch systems across the formation. The SM-6 Block 1 is a $4.3 million missile. Against 43 tracks, even a conservative shoot-look-shoot doctrine burns through the VLS inventory at a rate that leaves the strike group depleted and, more critically, illuminates the Aegis radar's precise frequency waveform and pulse structure for every passive collection system the Houthis had positioned offshore. Fire and you tell Iran exactly what frequency to exploit. Option 2, hold the VLS. Use other means. Gamble that what the SPY-6 couldn't cleanly classify wouldn't reach the flight deck of a ship carrying 5,200 personnel and $13 billion worth of American naval power. To understand why the Houthis dared to execute this operation, you have to rewind 72 hours and look at Tehran. Iran was in the worst internal crisis it had faced since 2009. The rial had shed 40% of its value in 6 weeks. Street protests had turned into something approaching an insurrection in 3 provincial capitals, with security forces struggling to contain crowds that weren't dispersing under warning fire. The death toll from suppression operations had crossed 6,000 by the December count. President Trump's response was to redirect the Lincoln Strike Group from its Pacific rotation and drive it into the Gulf, a direct, unambiguous signal that Washington was watching the internal crackdown and had positioned the means to respond if Tehran crossed the threshold. Iran needed pressure relief. It needed a story that wasn't about the streets of Isfahan. The Houthis were the answer. They are Iran's most capable and most willing proxy force, battle-hardened from a decade of asymmetric war, operating from terrain that makes ground assault prohibitively costly and that provides natural concealment for mobile launch platforms. 24 hours before the attack, Houthi media posted a single video clip, a burning carrier superimposed with the word "soon," which the intelligence community flagged and assessed as likely performative. They were wrong about the performative part. At 0302 hours in the western highland valleys of Yemen, Operation Pave Ghost went active. No radar emissions, no radio traffic. The launch coordinates had been fed into inertial navigation systems hours earlier, updated at the last minute via cross-reference data from an offshore intelligence vessel and overhead satellite pass. 43 objects left their concealed launch positions in complete electromagnetic silence. They flew nap of the Earth profiles through canyon systems that fragmented their radar returns, weaved laterally on pre-programmed evasion tracks designed specifically to defeat the flight path prediction algorithms embedded in Aegis Baseline 9. No two flew the same route. The formation was not a wave. It was a net, cast wide, designed to exhaust tracking capacity before the first defensive weapon left its tube. The Houthis' strategic objective was stated internally with brutal clarity and zero illusion about their actual capability. They knew they could not sink the Abraham Lincoln. That was never the mission. What they needed was a single contact with the flight deck. One explosion, captured on any camera with a cell signal. 10 seconds of footage showing fire on an American carrier, playing on loop across social media platforms, would accomplish more strategic damage than sinking a frigate. It would prove that the Aegis system, the spine of American naval power projection, had a seam. That proof was what Iran needed. The Red Sea was the test range. Back to the 38-second window. The strike group commander, CSG-3, made a decision that the tactical doctrine manuals would not have predicted. He ordered MCON Condition 1, emissions control, maximum restriction. Every active radar in the formation that could be safely silenced was silenced. The Aegis system's distinctive electromagnetic signature disappeared from the Houthi passive collection network. No SM-6 launches. No radar illumination of the target set. Instead, 2 F-35C Lightning IIs from the Black Knights, already airborne on the Combat Air Patrol cycle, received their tasking. The Multifunction Advanced Data Link, MADL, is not a radio. It's a directional, low probability of intercept waveform that connects fifth-generation aircraft in a shared tactical picture without broadcasting anything the enemy's collection systems can resolve into usable intelligence. The 2 F-35s, operating in complete radio silence from the carrier's perspective, built a merged track picture between their AN/A PG-81A ESA radars and their distributed aperture systems, and began their intercept geometries without a single emission that the Houthi surveillance net could exploit. The night sky over the Arabian Sea became a kill zone. 8 AIM-9X Block 2 Sidewinder missiles came off their wing stations in rapid sequence. Their infrared seekers locked onto the thermal plumes of 40-kilogram jet engines burning at low altitude against cold seawater. They did not miss. Then the pilots descended and went guns. The 25mm GAU-22/A cannon, 4-barrel, 3,300 rounds per minute, guided by helmet-mounted cueing systems that laid the bullet impact point in the pilot's visor with ballistic computation accurate to fractions of a degree in complete darkness at closing speeds approaching 700 knots. In 95 seconds, 35 of the 43 tracks disappeared from the tactical display. The Combat Information Center aboard the Peterson registered the clearance data, and the atmosphere broke. Officers who had been holding clinical stillness for the past 2 minutes exhaled into something approaching controlled relief. 35 of 43. The math looked like dominance. Then the lead F-35C pilot transmitted. Splash confirmed. No secondary detonation. Negative warhead signature. Composite debris and turbofan fragments only. These are decoys. Repeat. Full package was decoys. The Shahed 136J airframe is a cheap, Iranian-manufactured loitering munition that has been modified for the decoy role. Strip the warhead, reduce the radar cross-section, program an erratic flight profile, and you have a $20,000 object that can absorb a $4.3 million missile or occupy an F-35C's gun employment for 90 seconds. Multiply that by 43, and you've constructed a distraction that costs less than a single SM-6 and forces the defender to make firing decisions against targets that don't matter. The real cost of shooting them down wasn't the missiles expended. It was what those 43 burning carcasses left behind. Tons of carbonized composite airframe material, shredded and still hot, scattered across a 14 nautical mile debris field. Combined with the aluminum chaff dispensed by the decoys during their terminal phase, the debris layer generated a thermal and electromagnetic clutter environment that degraded the infrared search and track capability of every sensor in the formation. The F-35C's EOTS targeting pods, optimized for clean air, were now looking through a translucent wall of flickering heat sources. The SPY-6, which sees through most interference, was struggling to resolve new contacts emerging from within the clutter at low altitude. And emerging from within that clutter were 3 objects that had not been part of the original 43. The PAVE 351 is not a Houthi improvisation. It is a purpose-designed Iranian anti-ship cruise missile, a system that has been refined specifically to address the defensive characteristics of the Aegis architecture. It does not use active radar guidance, which would announce its presence to the SPY-6's ESM receivers. It uses passive optical terminal guidance, locking onto the visual and thermal contrast of a ship's hull against the sea surface. It is quiet in every electromagnetic sense. Against a system like Aegis that listens for radar emissions as part of its threat classification process, a missile that emits nothing is a more difficult problem than a missile that screams. The three PAVE 351s did not attempt a pop-up attack, the classic maneuver of climbing to altitude and diving onto the target, which maximizes seeker acquisition range, but also maximizes the defender's warning time and SM-2 engagement window. Instead, they held 3 meters above the wave tops and drove directly into the formation's flank, exploiting the geometric reality that a radar mounted at masthead height cannot see targets below the radar horizon at close range. At 3 meters of altitude, a Mach 0.88 missile skimming flat seawater doesn't appear on the Peterson's fire control radar until it's inside 7 nautical miles. At that range and that closing speed, you have less than 25 seconds to kill it. The AN/SLQ-32 V6 SEWIP Block 3 electronic warfare system attempted active jamming. The PAVE 351's passive seeker doesn't care about jamming. There is no RF signal to corrupt. The missile looks with its eye, and you cannot blind an eye with radio waves. The Phalanx close-in weapon system on the Peterson's bow mount elevated and acquired. The 20mm M61A1 Vulcan began its spin-up cycle. All 6 barrels cycling to 4,500 rounds per minute. The system's fire control radar painting the lead missile in its final seconds of flight. The tungsten stream intercepted. The PAVE 351's warhead cooked off at 400 meters from the hull. 400 meters is close enough. The detonation of a 250-kilogram warhead at 400 meters is not a near miss in any operational sense. The overpressure wave crossed the intervening distance in milliseconds. Superheated fragmentation, still carrying the kinetic energy of a Mach 0.88 airframe, arrived at the Peterson's starboard side as a horizontal sleet of metal moving faster than sound. The AN/SPY-6 phased array antenna array on the starboard sponson, the component that provides the ship's primary radar coverage across a full hemisphere, took direct fragmentation hits. The array's transmit-receive modules, each a precision electronic component, were shredded. The system did not degrade gracefully. It went offline in a cascade of electrical faults that the ship's damage control teams could not restore at sea. The Peterson's starboard hemisphere was now blind, not degraded, blind. Satellite imagery updated the tactical picture within minutes. Houthi mobile launch teams in the Highland Valleys were reloading. Their second salvo was being targeted at the bearing that the Peterson's damaged radar could no longer cover. The gap in the defensive network was known to the enemy before the damage control teams had finished their initial assessment. Iran had invested enormously in signals intelligence collection around American strike group operations. The radar that went down was a data point they had been watching for. The CSG-3 commander understood that passive defense, absorbing the incoming and shooting it down, was a losing attrition game. The enemy had more missiles than the formation had interceptors in a sustained engagement. The equation had to change at its source. The 2 F-35s overhead shut down their APG-81 radars. The AN/ASQ-239 Barracuda electronic warfare suite, the internal EW system integrated into the F-35C's airframe, shifted to passive collection mode, scanning for the backlink signal that the PAVE 351 missiles used to receive final targeting updates from their ground control element. The signal was weak, 370 megahertz, directional, buried in background noise. The Barracuda resolved it in 41 seconds, and the lead pilot transmitted the coordinates. A fire control node concealed in a canyon system 120 nautical miles inland. An EA-18G Growler from the Gauntlets launched from the Lincoln's waste catapult within 6 minutes of the coordinate transmission. The Growler's AN/ALQ-99 jamming system has been replaced in the Block 3 configuration by the next-generation Jammer mid-band, a pod capable of generating directed, high-power electronic attack against specific frequency bands with precision that the ALQ-99 could not approach. The NGJMB found the Houthi data link frequency and saturated it at a power level that rendered the entire ground control network non-functional. In the canyon, the control screens went dark simultaneously. The launch crews had no communications, no targeting updates, no situational awareness. The missile launchers were now steel and fuel, nothing more. The Houthi commander on the ground made the decision that tacticians describe as a rational response to total system failure and a desperate gamble simultaneously. With 28 Rod 500 missiles loaded and no data link to guide them, he switched the entire remaining inventory to inertial navigation and ordered a saturation barrage. Inertially guided missiles flying preloaded coordinates against a moving target at extended range are not precision weapons. They are probability weapons. Launch enough of them in the right general direction, and the mathematics of dispersion may put one or two within lethal range. 28 launch signatures erupted from the canyon system in a single 90-second window. The fireball was visible from space. The F-35C lead pilot understood before the Growler's jamming officer transmitted the update. Destroying the data link had bought time, not resolution. The source had to be eliminated. He rolled inverted and drove the nose down through 4,000 feet, descending into a valley environment seeded with ZU-23-2 anti-aircraft guns and shoulder-fired Igla-S missile teams. The ground threat that every low-altitude mission planner treats as the variable that ends careers and lives. The AN/AAQ-40 EOTS targeting pod acquired the command vehicle as it attempted to displace into a cave entrance 110 meters ahead of its current position. The GAU-22/A fired a 181-round burst that walked a line of 25mm armor-piercing impacts across the canyon floor and through the vehicle's engine compartment. A single AIM-9X completed the engagement. The secondary explosions confirmed the vehicle's ammunition load had cooked off. The SA-24 shoulder-fired missiles came off the ridgeline within 3 seconds of the vehicle's destruction. 2 white smoke trails climbing fast, closing the angle on the F-35C as it pulled off target in a maximum performance climbing turn. The pilot dispensed flares in a programmed sequence. The first missile tracked through the flare cloud and detonated behind the aircraft's tail, the warhead's proximity fuse triggering inside 18 feet of the airframe. The blast overpressure rolled the F-35C through 40 degrees of uncontrolled roll before the flight control computers caught it. The wing root took fragmentation hits that the maintenance logs would later classify as Category 3 damage. Serious but flyable. The pilot got the nose pointed west and climbed. Dawn found the Arabian Sea quiet. All 28 inertially guided Rod 500 missiles impacted the ocean surface between 2 and 7 nautical miles short of the nearest American hull. Without updated targeting coordinates, the preloaded inertial solutions were tracking a formation position that the strike group had already vacated. The Abraham Lincoln held course, her flight deck unscathed, her air wing recovering and rearming. The accounting, conducted honestly, goes in both directions. The Houthi expended more than 30 decoy drones, 8 PAVE 351 cruise missiles, 28 Rod 500 ballistic rounds, and their forward fire control node with its crew and communications equipment. They lost the initiative. They lost concealment of a critical command element's location. They demonstrated the terminal performance ceiling of their most capable anti-ship weapon. The strike group expended ammunition, flight hours, and 1 SPY-6 phased array that will require a minimum of 72 hours of at-sea repair work before the Peterson returns to full capability. The ship can fight in the interim with degraded sensor coverage on one bearing covered by adjacent hulls in the formation. But the word degraded appears in no American naval commander's preferred vocabulary. Tehran read the engagement data and reached a conclusion that did not include the phrase, "the Aegis system is undefeatable." What Iran's analysis showed was a confirmed vulnerability, a saturation attack that combines cheap decoys to exhaust interceptor economics, passive seeker terminal weapons to defeat electronic warfare, and low-altitude approach geometry to compress defender reaction time. That combination generated a fragmentation hit on a billion-dollar warship's primary radar. The lesson Iran filed away was not that they lost, it was precisely how far they got and what combination of means got them there. The Abraham Lincoln is still on station. The carrier flag flies above a flight deck that never took fire. President Trump's statement was direct. Any targeting of American assets will be answered with annihilation. The watch sections aboard the Lincoln have rotated. The pilots who flew that night have debriefed, slept 4 hours, and returned to the alert cycle. The Red Sea is quiet this morning. That quiet has a specific texture that every sailor in the formation recognizes. It is the quiet of a test that produced results, and of an adversary somewhere inland studying those results and refining the next iteration. The question worth sitting with is this. The Houthis achieved a radar kill on a Flight 3 Arleigh Burke using a combination of decoys and a passive seeker missile that electronic warfare couldn't stop. Does that change how you assess the long-term viability of surface ship operations in a contested littoral environment? Or does the overall outcome, all 28 final missiles falling short, the carrier intact, the enemy's command node destroyed, prove that the layered defense still holds? Leave your answer below.